We think a joke ends with a laugh, but the laws of physics don't have a sense of humor. Today we document 6 times a harmless prank triggered a fatal, irreversible chain reaction. This is a cold analysis of human error. Never test the limits of biology for a cheap thrill. Watch how quickly a funny idea turns into a permanent consequence. August 2004. A dark 2-lane county highway cuts through the dense cornfields of the American Midwest. There are no streetlights here. There is no ambient city glow. The only illumination comes from the sweeping halogen headlights of a lone vehicle. Night driving is an exercise in total trust. We trust that the road will continue. We trust that the painted lines will guide us safely. Most importantly, we trust the visual language of traffic engineering. The system is incredibly simple but entirely vital. A standard stop sign is coated in highly engineered, retro-reflective sheeting. This material is embedded with millions of microscopic glass spheres. When a headlight beam strikes the surface, these tiny spheres catch the light. They bounce it directly back to the driver. It transforms a cold piece of metal into a glowing, bright red command. It tells the human brain to move the foot from the accelerator to the brake pedal. It is a foolproof mechanical dialogue between the car and the environment. But systems only work when they are left alone. On this specific, suffocatingly hot night, that dialogue was intentionally severed. 2 19-year-old boys were wandering the empty back roads. They were driven by the reckless boredom that only teenagers possess. They wanted to play a prank. They had a heavy roll of opaque, black industrial plastic. They chose an isolated, unlit 4-way intersection. This specific crossing ended in a steep drainage ditch and a heavy steel guardrail. Working quickly in the dark, they pulled a thick black plastic bag directly over the octagonal stop sign. They wrapped the base tightly with heavy tape. They did not understand the severe physics of their joke. They thought they were just hiding a piece of metal. In reality, they had just created a visual black hole. Black plastic does not reflect light. It absorbs it completely. To any approaching driver, the sign would not look like a covered object. It would perfectly mimic the empty, endless black void of an open road. They crawled into the tall weeds to watch. 5 miles away, a heavy 2-ton pickup truck was rolling down the blacktop. Behind the wheel sat a 72-year-old pensioner. He was tired from a long day. He was driving entirely on muscle memory. He knew this route perfectly. His heavy vehicle was cruising at exactly 50 miles per hour. That is roughly 80 kilometers per hour. At this speed, a heavy truck carries a massive, lethal amount of forward kinetic energy. Stopping requires a minimum of 150 feet. The driver was totally relaxed. He had zero expectation of an anomaly. The intersection approached rapidly in the dark. This was the critical moment of intersection. His brain unconsciously scanned the right shoulder. He was waiting for the familiar, comforting flash of the red hexagon. He needed that optical trigger to initiate the braking sequence, but the trigger had been deleted. The truck's headlights swept directly over the plastic-wrapped sign. The thick black material swallowed the light instantly. Nothing bounced back. The optical illusion was flawless. The driver's brain processed the unbroken darkness as a clear, straight highway. He did not lift his foot off the gas pedal. He maintained full highway velocity. He crossed the invisible threshold of the intersection where he was supposed to stop. The road simply vanished beneath his tires. The heavy truck launched off the pavement. Directly in its path stood the reinforced steel guardrail. There was absolutely zero time for human reaction. There were no skid marks left on the asphalt. The truck slammed into the immovable steel barrier at full speed. The sudden deceleration from 50 miles per hour to zero was absolute violent. The laws of physics demanded the immediate transfer of massive kinetic energy. The heavy steel frame of the vehicle buckled like foil. The engine block was forced backward into the cabin space. The steering column was rapidly displaced directly into the driver's chest cavity. The man suffered catastrophic blunt force trauma to his torso. The immense mechanical pressure caused instant structural failure of his internal organs. The sheer magnitude of the impact triggered an immediate, irreversible cardiac arrest. The physical damage was entirely non-survivable. He lost consciousness in a fraction of a millisecond. The deafening crunch of shattering glass and tearing metal echoed across the empty fields. Then a heavy silence rushed back in. It was broken only by the hiss of boiling radiator fluid and the piercing, continuous wail of the truck's horn. The steering wheel was pinned down by the collapsed dashboard. The horn screamed blindly into the night. 20 yards away in the ditch, the two teenagers froze in the dirt. Their laughter died instantly. The black plastic bag still fluttered lightly on the pole. It was a harmless joke that weaponized the laws of optics, resulting in a perfectly executed, fatal trap. May 2007. The fundamental purpose of a wrought iron balcony railing is psychological comfort. When properly engineered, it is a rigid physical barrier designed to separate human life from a fatal drop. We trust these heavy metal structures implicitly. We lean against them. We put our full body weight on them without a single conscious thought. But iron is constantly at war with the environment. The silent, invisible process of galvanic corrosion never stops. Moisture, oxygen, and time combine to create a slow chemical reaction. Hardened steel degrades into brittle, flaky rust. This decay usually hides deep inside the concrete base. This is exactly where the heavy anchor bolts secure the railing to the floor. From a distance, the black iron barrier still looks completely solid. It offers the perfect illusion of structural integrity. In reality, it possesses almost zero mechanical strength. It is a dead trap just waiting for a dynamic physical test. On a warm spring evening, a heavy-set man stood alone on a fourth-floor balcony. He weighed 210 pounds. He was enjoying the quiet air. He was completely relaxed, holding a cold drink. He stood with his back pressed casually against the center of the old iron railing. His posture was totally unguarded. His center of gravity was shifted backward. He was relying entirely on the corroded metal to keep him upright. He was completely immersed in the peaceful atmosphere of the courtyard below. He did not hear the sliding glass door open behind him. He did not hear his roommate quietly stepping onto the balcony. The roommate was holding a large marine-grade pneumatic air horn. This device is not a toy. It is a serious acoustic tool designed for emergency maritime signaling. It uses a highly compressed gas canister to force a plastic diaphragm to vibrate violently. It produces an immediate, deafening blast that easily exceeds 120 decibels. This level of extreme sound pressure is physically painful to the human ear. It is engineered to cut through dense sea fog to alert massive cargo ships miles away. It is absolutely not meant to be fired just inches from a relaxed human skull. The roommate thought the sudden, massive scare would make a hilarious video. He slowly raised the bright red plastic horn. He positioned it directly behind the standing man's head. He pressed down firmly on the trigger mechanism. The highly pressurized gas escaped in a violent rush. The deafening blast hit the victim's ears with devastating speed. The human body is hardwired for primitive survival. We possess a deeply ingrained biological defense called the startle reflex. When the brain detects a sudden, explosive noise, it bypasses conscious logical thought entirely. The autonomic nervous system takes total, instantaneous control. It fires massive electrical signals directly down the spinal cord to the major muscle groups. The biological intent is to jerk the body away from a hidden predator in a fraction of a second. But this ancient defense mechanism cannot calculate modern environmental context. It does not know about balconies or rust. The victim's back and leg muscles contracted violently in a massive involuntary spasm. This generated sudden explosive rearward momentum. His 210 pounds of resting mass instantly transformed into a heavy dynamic load. His entire body jerked sharply backward, slamming into the rusted iron barrier. It was a massive, concentrated transfer of kinetic energy. The compromised metal never stood a chance against the sudden spike in force. The brittle, heavily corroded anchor bolt sheared cleanly off from the crumbling concrete. There was a sharp metallic crack. The entire iron railing detached completely from the edge of the balcony. It swung outward into the open air. The illusion of safety vanished in a microsecond. The man's center of gravity shifted completely over the concrete ledge. His arms flailed wildly, dropping his drink, grasping at the empty air. But there was nothing left to hold. He crossed the fatal threshold. The unyielding force of gravity took absolute control of his mass. The descent from the fourth floor elevation took exactly 8 seconds. Time dilated as the rushing air roared past his ears. The sudden deceleration upon striking the solid concrete pavement below was entirely catastrophic. The tremendous kinetic energy from the fall caused immediate, severe structural failure of his skeletal frame. The massive blunt force trauma transferred directly into his vital organs. He suffered a critical, fatal injury to the upper cervical spine. The severe mechanical damage triggered an instantaneous cardiac arrest. The trauma was absolutely non-survivable. The medical coroner later confirmed he lost consciousness at the exact microsecond of impact. Up on the fourth floor, the deafening echo of the air horn finally faded into the quiet suburban streets. The roommate stood frozen in absolute, paralyzing shock. His thumb still rested lightly on the plastic trigger of the red horn. He stared blankly down at the four ragged holes in the balcony concrete. Down below, the jagged pieces of rusted iron lay scattered across the sidewalk. They rested silently next to the motionless figure. A simple joke designed to provoke a laugh had successfully manipulated human biology, turning an involuntary reflex into a fatal mechanical failure. June 2008, a young man sat completely relaxed in the passenger seat of a moving golf cart, casually enjoying the warm summer breeze. He had no reason to expect any danger from a vehicle widely considered the most harmless machine on the planet. Picture a sprawling suburban country club on a bright afternoon. The loudest sound was the quiet, high-pitched whine of a 48-volt electric motor. A standard cart has a governed top speed of about 18 miles per hour. That is exactly 30 kilometers per hour. At this low speed, the vehicle feels incredibly docile. The wind simply breezes past you. It feels entirely safe. But the unyielding laws of physics do not care about feelings. A golf cart is structurally hollow. It is essentially a bare metal chassis on small tires. There are no doors to enclose you. There are no seatbelts to secure you. It offers absolutely zero physical containment for the fragile human body. The wide bench seats are covered in smooth, waterproof vinyl. This slick material provides almost zero friction against clothing. The vehicle relies entirely on basic gravity to keep its occupants safely inside. The passenger was not holding on to the side metal handholds. He trusted the driver completely. His physical guard was totally down. Next to him, the driver was feeling reckless and incredibly bored. He decided to execute a spontaneous prank. He wanted to aggressively shake up his relaxed friend for a quick, cheap laugh. The driver waited until the cart hit its maximum top speed on a perfectly straight paved service path. He gripped the plastic steering wheel tightly. Without giving a single verbal warning, he violently yanked the wheel as hard as he could to the right. He forced the heavy vehicle into a severe, high-speed evasive maneuver. He completely ignored the fundamental laws of motion. When a heavy object is moving forward, it naturally wants to keep moving in a straight line. This is the basic principle of inertia. When a vehicle suddenly alters its path, the unsecured objects inside it are subjected to intense centrifugal force. Imagine swinging a heavy bucket of water in a rapid, tight circle. The water pushes violently against the solid bottom of the bucket. In this sharp, unannounced turn, the passenger's body became the water. But the open side of the golf cart had no solid bottom to catch him. The heavy cart darted sharply to the right. The passenger's resting body obeyed Newton's first law of motion. It continued traveling perfectly straight ahead. The sudden, immense lateral force easily overpowered his relaxed posture. He had absolutely zero time to process the threat. He had no time to reach out and grab the metal safety handle. The frictionless vinyl seat offered absolutely no resistance to stop him. His body slid rapidly across the slick bench. He was violently ejected right out of the moving vehicle. The severe centrifugal force catapulted him sideways into the open air. His center of gravity completely cleared the edge of the cart. He entered a rapid, uncontrolled state of horizontal free flight. The human skull is a highly engineered biological shell. It is designed to protect the brain from minor, everyday bumps and falls. It is absolutely not designed to absorb the concentrated kinetic energy of a flying human body striking a fixed, solid object. His horizontal trajectory abruptly intersected with a heavy parking bollard. This was a thick steel pipe anchored deep into the pavement. It was filled entirely with solid concrete. It was painted bright yellow for high visibility. It was structurally engineered to stop a heavy runaway delivery truck. The collision was absolutely catastrophic. The passenger struck the unyielding steel post head first. The precise point of impact was the temporal bone. This is one of the thinnest, most fragile areas of the human skull. The collision occurred in a fraction of a millisecond. The massive immediate transfer of kinetic energy caused catastrophic structural failure of the cranium. The severe blunt force trauma transferred directly and deeply into the vital brainstem. He suffered an instant, irreversible loss of consciousness. The extreme mechanical shock triggered an immediate cardiac arrest. The sheer magnitude of the physical forces made the blunt force injuries completely non-survivable. The heavy electric golf cart finally completed its sharp right turn. It rolled slowly onto the soft, manicured grass. The electric motor hummed a quiet, peaceful note. The driver slammed on the brakes. He laughed and turned around, fully expecting to hear his friend cursing from the ground. Instead, he was met with absolute, chilling silence. The brightly colored steel bollard stood perfectly straight. It was completely undamaged by the heavy impact. The passenger lay completely motionless on the warm concrete path directly beneath it. A careless, impulsive attempt to create a brief moment of panic had successfully weaponized the absolute laws of physics. It transformed a slow-moving, harmless recreational toy into a highly effective, fatal ejection mechanism. November 2003. A cramped dormitory room at a sprawling university campus was perfectly silent. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. The heavy, rhythmic breathing of a deeply sleeping student filled the dark, confined space. The room was meant to be a sanctuary of total safety. A standard twin-size bed sat securely in the corner. Sleep is a state of absolute physical vulnerability. The human body completely powers down its defensive reflexes. The core muscles relax entirely. The brain enters a deep, restorative cycle, totally disconnected from the physical world. Across the small room stood a heavy, wooden wardrobe. It was a solid piece of standardized university furniture. Perched quietly on the very top of this 6-foot-tall structure was the victim's roommate. He was wide awake. He was heavily fueled by the chaotic, impulsive energy of a late-night joke. He wanted to execute an epic, unforgettable wake-up call. His plan was dangerously simple. He intended to jump off the high wardrobe and land directly onto the empty half of the mattress. He wanted to compress the steel bed springs violently. He wanted the loud explosive noise and the sudden mattress bounce to shock his sleeping friend awake. He thought it would be a hilarious, harmless startle, but he was operating in near total darkness. The human eye cannot accurately judge spatial distance without sufficient ambient light. He was relying entirely on vague visual guesswork. He also fundamentally misunderstood the severe physics of falling mass. A human body in free fall generates a massive amount of kinetic energy. The roommate weighed exactly 175 pounds. That is roughly 80 kilograms. When a mass of that size drops from a height of 6 feet, gravity accelerates it rapidly. If that heavy mass lands on a flat, soft surface, the energy disperses harmlessly. If that mass leads with a hardened, narrow point of contact, the energy becomes a highly concentrated weapon. The roommate crouched on the dusty top of the tall wardrobe. He focused on the vague silhouette of the bed below. He blindly estimated his downward trajectory. He stepped confidently off the wooden ledge. Gravity took immediate, absolute control of his body. The rapid descent lasted less than a single second. Time artificially dilated as he fell through the dark, silent air. He tucked his legs upward to prepare for the mattress impact. His right knee dropped to the lowest point. A human kneecap is a dense, hardened block of solid bone. In the pitch-black room, his spatial calculation was slightly flawed. He missed his intended target zone by exactly 6 inches. That is a mere 15 centimeters. It is roughly the length of a standard ink pen. But in the strict, unforgiving mathematics of physics, a 15-centimeter error is the absolute difference between a loud joke and a fatal ballistic strike. He did not hit the empty, forgiving mattress springs. His descending 80-kilogram mass slammed directly into the deeply sleeping victim. His descending weight impacted squarely into the victim's solar plexus. The solar plexus is a dense, highly vulnerable cluster of nerves and vital organs located just below the rib cage. It is the soft, unarmored center of the human torso. The sleeper's fully relaxed abdominal muscles offered absolutely zero mechanical resistance. The massive kinetic energy transferred instantly and violently deep into the abdominal cavity. The victim was severely compressed between the massive downward force of the falling knee and the rigid wooden bed frame beneath the mattress. The sudden, immense pressure spike caused immediate, catastrophic structural failure of the internal organs. The victim suffered massive blunt force trauma to his physiological core. The devastating physical shock overwhelmed the autonomic nervous system instantly. The severe trauma triggered an immediate and irreversible cardiac arrest. The sleeper never even woke up to process the pain of the violent impact. He suffered a complete instant loss of consciousness. The severe internal injury was absolutely non-survivable before the heavy crash even finished echoing off the walls. The cheap metal springs of the mattress shrieked loudly and bounced a few times. The roommate rolled off the bed onto the carpet. He laughed loudly in the dark. He waited excitedly for his friend to yell at him. He waited for the furious, confused reaction he had carefully planned for. But the only sound left in the small room was the low, steady hum of the small refrigerator in the corner. The silence quickly stretched into a cold, permanent void. The frantic call for an emergency medical team was made minutes later. However, the biological sequence of death had already entirely concluded. A minor miscalculation of physical distance in the dark had instantly transformed a harmless college prank into a fatal mechanical failure of the human body. May 2012. In a highly repetitive environment, the human brain relies entirely on visual autopilot to save energy. When someone tosses an object toward you, your eyes instantly look at its size to calculate its weight. The heavy clanking of forklifts echoed through a massive auto parts warehouse as a veteran worker decided to exploit this exact biological reflex. In a fraction of a second, your brain calculates how heavy that object should be. It then sends a very specific electrical signal to your muscles. It tells them exactly how much to flex to catch the item safely. If someone throws you a heavy brick, your muscles instantly lock up and brace for a hard impact. But if someone throws you an empty cardboard box, your body stays completely loose. A standard cardboard box is universally recognized as a lightweight object. It is just thin, folded paper and empty air. Your body naturally prepares to catch it with zero physical effort. On this specific shift, a veteran warehouse worker decided to play a joke on his younger partner. The younger man was incredibly skinny, weighing barely 140 pounds. The older co-worker found a standard brown shipping box. He secretly placed a solid steel transmission gear inside it. This heavy industrial machine part weighed exactly 20 kilograms. That is 44 pounds of dense metal. He folded the cardboard flaps and taped the box completely shut. He created a perfect visual lie. He built a scenario where a totally harmless-looking object hid a severe physical threat. The skinny partner was standing near a wooden sorting table, wiping sweat from his face. His posture was totally relaxed. His physical guard was completely down. He had no idea a heavy mass was about to enter his personal space. The co-worker stood roughly 10 feet away. He suddenly yelled for his partner to catch. He heaved the taped box underhand with both hands. The victim instantly turned toward the noise. His eyes locked onto the flying brown square. The trajectory was a slow, easy arc. His brain made an immediate, fatal miscalculation. It judged the flying object strictly by its cardboard outside. It assumed the box weighed nothing. The nervous system told the muscles in his arms and chest to remain completely soft and loose. He did not tighten his core. He did not brace his feet. He casually opened his arms, planning to trap the supposedly weightless box against his chest. He expected a gentle, hollow bump. The brown box struck his work shirt, but the heavy steel gear hidden inside was strictly obeying the laws of motion. It carried a massive amount of forward momentum. The thin layer of paper cardboard offered absolutely zero resistance to the heavy, moving metal. As the front of the box stopped against the victim's chest, the 44-pound gear did not stop at all. It instantly punched right through the back wall of the cardboard. The heavy kinetic energy bypassed the paper barrier completely. It transferred directly into the young man's totally unprepared chest. His relaxed muscles provided absolutely no armor. The solid steel struck squarely against the center of his rib cage. The extreme blunt force trauma caused an immediate structural failure of his skeletal frame. The devastating mechanical impact sent a highly concentrated shock wave deep into his chest cavity. This sudden mechanical impact landed directly over his unprotected heart. The localized pressure spike instantly disrupted the heart's delicate electrical rhythm. The organ suffered a catastrophic mechanical failure. He went into an immediate and irreversible cardiac arrest. The severe internal injury was absolutely non-survivable. The young man lost consciousness in a fraction of a second. His limp body collapsed backward and hit the cold concrete floor. The busy warehouse suddenly felt entirely silent. The heavy steel gear rolled slowly out of the torn cardboard box. It clanked against the floor and came to a dead stop. The co-worker's smile vanished instantly. He stood completely frozen, staring at his empty hands. A simple workplace prank had successfully tricked the human brain's visual warning system. It forced a basic biological defense mechanism to shut down, allowing a heavy piece of machinery to deliver a fatal, unimpeded strike. August 2009, a young man stood silently at the very edge of the deep end of a private swimming pool, looking down into the bright blue water. He was completely relaxed, his physical guard totally down under the baking summer sun. In environments like this, we forget that a pool is essentially a massive, rigid concrete hole filled with heavy water. We walk around the slippery edges with dangerous confidence. The human body keeps itself standing upright through a highly complex, continuous biological calculation. Your brain relies on a delicate sense of balance to keep you from falling. It constantly measures gravity and checks the physical grip under your bare feet. Maintaining balance is an active, ongoing process. Jumping into a pool on purpose requires a very specific set of physical steps. You bend your knees, shift your weight forward, and push off the solid edge. This action absolutely requires strong surface grip. But wet ceramic tile and soaked concrete offer almost zero friction. The edge of a pool is a boundary defined by a total lack of mechanical grip. His arms hung loosely by his sides, his weight perfectly still. A few yards away, a close friend decided to pull the most common summer prank in the world. He wanted to sneak up quietly from behind and shove the standing man forcefully into the water. He wanted to see a funny, flailing splash. He crept quietly across the wet deck. His bare feet made no sound on the warm concrete. The standing victim remained entirely still. His toes were lightly touching the curved white edge of the pool. He was totally unaware of the approaching physical threat. The friend stopped right behind him. He raised both hands and placed his palms squarely on the middle of the victim's back. He delivered a sudden, aggressive, and forceful shove. He fully expected his friend's body to simply launch forward and fall safely into the deep water. But human biology cannot adapt to a surprise physical attack without time to react. The forceful push instantly threw the victim's weight forward. His internal balance system immediately detected the sudden falling motion. It triggered an emergency biological reflex. The brain sent a lightning-fast signal to the leg muscles. It commanded the feet to quickly step forward and push back to stop the fall. But the physical environment completely betrayed this survival reflex. As the victim's wet, bare feet pushed down to catch his balance, they found absolutely zero friction. The smooth, water-slick tile offered no grip at all. Instead of stepping forward, both of his wet feet slipped rapidly and uncontrollably out from under him. They shot forward over the edge of the pool into empty space. This sudden loss of traction violently reversed his entire physical path. His legs flew upward. His heavy upper body instantly rotated backward. Gravity took absolute, unforgiving control of his falling weight. The man dropped backward in a rapid, totally uncontrolled physical arc. He did not fall forward into the soft, forgiving water. His heavy torso accelerated backward, directly toward the rigid, 90-degree concrete corner of the pool edge. The physics of the fall were precise and entirely devastating. The back of his skull struck the unyielding concrete rim with massive, concentrated force. The sudden, extreme impact caused catastrophic structural failure of his cervical spine. He suffered a massive, fatal, blunt force trauma directly to his neck and upper spinal cord. The profound physical shock to his central nervous system caused an immediate and absolute loss of consciousness. His bodily systems simply shut down in a fraction of a millisecond. His entire body went completely limp before it even left the hard concrete. The leftover momentum carried his heavy, unconscious form over the edge. He slipped silently down into the blue water. The severe physical trauma triggered an immediate, irreversible cardiac arrest. The sheer magnitude of the blunt force injury made survival completely impossible. The splash was surprisingly small. His body sank rapidly to the bottom of the 10-foot deep end. It came to rest completely motionless against the painted blue plaster. The loud pop music continued to play from the speakers. The sharp smell of chlorine drifted in the warm breeze. The friend stood frozen at the very edge of the pool. His wet hands were still reaching outward in the pushing motion. He stared down through the rippling water in absolute paralyzing shock. A harmless, playful shove had instantly manipulated a complete lack of surface friction. It turned a funny, expected splash into a fatal, high-velocity collision against solid concrete. A split-second choice erased 6 lives forever. Let's talk about the surviving pranksters. Should a fatal accident caused by pure stupidity carry the exact same prison sentence as a deliberate, cold-blooded crime? Where do you draw the legal line between a joke and manslaughter? Drop your verdict below. Hit subscribe and leave a like before you make your own fatal mistake.